Chapter 1, Sir, I'm here to file for a contested divorce. Eleanor waverly pushed a stack of papers across the counter, her voice as still as stagnant water. The clerk looked up at her, his expression serious. Ma'am, a divorce is no small matter. Have you fallen out of love with your husband? If there are conflicts, the organization can help mediate. A bitter smile touched Eleanor's lips. Mediate. In her last life, she had spent an entire lifetime seeing that man for who he was. Reborn into this one, she would never repeat the same mistakes. I won't accept mediation. Her voice was soft, yet it was like a pair of sharp scissors, decisively severing all possibilities. I just want a divorce. The clerk sighed and stamped the documents with a red seal. The paperwork will be processed in a month. You'll need to come back then. Stepping out of the county clerk's office, the early spring sunlight stung Eleanor's eyes. She clutched the lapels of her faded blue coat and walked toward the military family compound. Along the way, she kept digging her nails into her palm, leaving deep crescent marks. This wasn't a dream. She had truly returned to 1983, back to a time when she could still salvage everything. Eleanor, another letter from your Commander Hawthorne. As soon as she entered the compound, Mrs. Watson handed her an envelope with a wide smile. This must be the 29th one, right? He's been on assignment for 3 months, sending piles of love letters. Everyone in the compound envies how devoted you two are. The words, my dearest love, on the envelope were penned in Ethan Hawthorne's unmistakable, forceful handwriting. The joy these letters had brought her in her past life was matched only by the irony she felt now. Just as Eleanor was about to speak, the aroma of cooked meat wafted over. She turned to see her next-door neighbor, Ivy Lowell, eating meat buns with her daughter, Mimi. The white dough glistened with oil, the scent hanging thick in the air. And her own 5-year-old son, Leo, was crouched on their doorstep, staring at the mother and daughter, clutching a hard, dry cornbread roll in his hand. Oh, younger sister-in-law, you're back? Ivy spotted her and deliberately raised her voice. Ethan should be back today, right? You know him, so much trouble to send you love letters every day from his assignment while sending me his stipend. Eleanor's nails dug deeper into her palm. How ridiculous. It was the same in her last life. Ethan gave her all his love, but he gave all his money to his sister-in-law, Ivy. She still remembered the day Ethan proposed. The man stood in his crisp military uniform, a large red flower pinned to his chest. He held her hand in front of City Hall, his voice low and solemn. Eleanor, Ethan Hawthorne, will never fail you in this life. Back then, everyone envied her. Who was Ethan Hawthorne? The most promising young officer in the military compound. He had protected her since childhood, warming her hands in winter, fanning her in summer, and getting anxious if she so much as coughed. In the first year of their marriage, the love letters he wrote during his missions could be stacked into a thick pile. Every single one began with my dearest love and ended with a clumsily drawn heart. But all that changed after his older brother was killed in action. At the funeral, Ethan knelt before the memorial, his eyes bloodshot. He looked at Ivy, who was holding her child, and said, word for word, sister-in-law, from now on, I will take full responsibility for you and your daughter. At the time, Eleanor had admired his sense of honor and loyalty, until Ivy's table was laden with meat at every meal, while her and Leo's bowls contained nothing but watery rice porridge, so thin you could see your reflection. Mimi skipped around in brand new little leather shoes, while the soles of Leo's cloth shoes were worn through, his toes purple with cold. Ethan's monthly stipend of $30 went straight to the house next door, down to the last cent. Later, he was promoted from regiment commander to chief. The day the orders came, he stroked Leo's head and said, once Dad gets settled in the capital, I'll bring you both over. But in the end, the ones who went to the capital with him were Ivy and Mimi. Eleanor and her son were left behind in the countryside, surviving on government assistance. He continued to write letters, every word filled with love and longing, yet he never sent a single dollar, nor did he ever come back to see them. Until that snowy night, Leo was gravely ill. She sold the silver bracelet from her wedding and begged her way to the capital with her child. The city lights burned her eyes. From a distance, she saw Ethan get out of a jeep, followed by Ivy in a wool coat and Mimi wearing a golden locket. She had just started to run toward them when a guard kicked her squarely in the chest. Get lost, don't dirty the path for the chief's wife. That kick was vicious. She coughed up a mouthful of blood, watching helplessly as Ethan's back disappeared into the crowd, deaf to her desperate cries. Leo died on that snowy night, and she, clutching her son's cold body, closed her eyes in despair. "Mommy," Leo's timid voice pulled her back to reality. The child looked up, his grape-like eyes filled with anxiety. "Why are you crying?" Only then did Alina realize that tears had soaked the front of her coat. She knelt and hugged her son's thin body tightly. "Leo, Mommy is going to divorce Daddy. Are you willing to come with me?" The child froze, tears instantly welling up. "Why, Mommy, don't leave Daddy. Daddy loves us, he just. Alina's heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife. Leo was only 5, yet he was already sensitive enough to feel his father's injustice. Ethan did love them, but love couldn't be eaten as food, worn as clothes, or, most importantly, save their lives in a moment of crisis. "Leo, let's make a bet, okay?" She wiped away his tears. "When Daddy comes back later, let's see whose house he enters first. If he goes to see Auntie Ivy first, it means they are more important. Then you'll come with Mommy, and Mommy will find you a better daddy. If he comes to see us first, Mommy won't get a divorce." Leo bit his lip and nodded, his small hand clutching her sleeve tightly. As evening fell, a military jeep drove into the compound. Ethan stepped out in his immaculate uniform, carrying several bags. Alina stood by the window, watching the man who had once haunted her dreams. With his sharp brows, bright eyes, broad shoulders, and long legs, he certainly had what it took to drive women mad. "Daddy's back," Mimi's cheerful cry came from next door. Ethan's steps faltered. He turned and walked directly toward Ivy's house. Alina's heart sank to the bottom of a ravine, but she clung to a sliver of hope, counting his steps 1, 2, 7. He stopped at Ivy's door. "Sister-in-law, here's this month's stipend." Ethan's voice carried through the thin wall. "Mimi has grown taller. I bought her a new dress." "This is too much. You should leave some for Alina and Leo," Ivy said, feigning refusal. "No need. I have other arrangements for Alina." Ethan's rejection was swift and clean. "Daddy," Mimi threw herself into Ethan's arms. "Mimi, don't call me that," Ivy said, her voice laced with a smile. "I want to call you Daddy, I want to." All right. When no one's around, you can call me Daddy." Ethan's laughter pierced Alina's eardrums. She looked down at Leo. The child's tears were falling like broken strings of pearls, but he stubbornly bit his lip to keep from crying out. In that moment, Alina wished she could kill her past self. How could she have only woken up to the truth in this lifetime? "I swear," she knelt, pulling the child into her arms, "I will find you a better daddy, okay?" Leo buried his face in her shoulder, his small body trembling. "Okay, Mommy, I'll go with you. I don't want this daddy anymore." Chapter 2, the words had barely left his mouth when the wooden door creaked open. Ethan's tall figure appeared in the doorway, his uniform still carrying the dampness of the early spring rain. "Don't want what?" He raised a sharp eyebrow, clearly not having heard their conversation. Alina turned her back, to wipe the moisture from the corners of her eyes. Leo lowered his head and fiddled with the hem of his shirt. Neither of them answered. Ethan strode over, scooped Leo into his arms, and planted a loud kiss on his small cheek. "Son, did you miss Daddy?" Leo's small body stiffened. His grape-like eyes stole a glance at his mother. "What, are you mad at Daddy?" Ethan rubbed his stubble against the child's face, making Leo squirm. "How about Daddy gives you a piggyback ride?" Alina watched the scene, her nails digging deep into her palms. It was always like this in her past life. Ethan could always coax Leo into forgetting all his grievances with just a few words. But this time, she could clearly see the hurt hidden in her son's eyes. After being coaxed for a while, Leo finally spoke in a small voice. "Daddy, the souvenirs you promised to bring me. Did you bring them?" Ethan's movements paused. He then stroked his son's head. "The ration tickets were limited, so I gave them to Mimi this time. Next time, Daddy will definitely bring some for you, okay? Then, what about the milk candies? Mimi loves sweets, so Daddy gave them all to her." As he spoke, Ethan pulled half a piece of hard candy from his pocket. "Daddy saved this specially for you." Leo stared at the piece of candy, which was already slightly melted, his little mouth pressed into a thin line. A pain shot through Alina's chest. She knew that expression all too well. Whenever he was disappointed to the extreme, Leo would bite his lip just like that. "When the fabric coupons are issued next month, I'll have a few new dresses made for you." Ethan turned to her, his gaze lingering for a moment on her faded collar. "Blue looks good on you." Eleanor forced a smile. She had heard such words too many times. In the end, the new clothes would always end up on Ivy. Just like in her past life, when Ethan said he would take them to the capital, but ended up taking Ivy and her daughter instead. Dinner was a watery porridge, so thin you could see your reflection, served with a small dish of pickled vegetables. Ethan frowned. "Why are we eating this?" "The food rations are used up," Eleanor said calmly as she served Leo his porridge. "Didn't I just give?" Ethan stopped mid-sentence, his face looking a little unnatural. "I'll go to the general store tomorrow and buy some flour." Eleanor didn't reply. She knew that tomorrow, the flour would appear on Ivy's stove, just as it had every time before. "Ethan," Ivy's voice came with a knock on the door. "Mimi says she's too cold to sleep. Can we borrow a thick quilt? The child gets cold easily." Without a second thought, Ethan stood up and took the only cotton quilt from the cabinet. Eleanor pressed down on a corner of the quilt. "Leo was coughing last night. Little boys are resilient, they won't freeze." Ethan was already at the door with the quilt. "Mimi is a girl, she's more delicate." After the door closed, Leo asked in a small voice, "Mommy, can I sleep with you tonight?" Eleanor tucked her son's cold little feet into her arms, listening to the rain lashing against the window, and lay awake all night. At dawn, she noticed Leo's cheeks were flushed. A touch to his forehead confirmed he was burning up. "Ethan, Leo has a fever," she called out several times with no answer. Pushing the door open, she realized Ethan wasn't home at all. Commander Hawthorne took sister-in-law Ivy to the hospital before dawn. Their neighbor, Mrs. Zimmerman, told her, holding an umbrella. "Mimi has a high fever too, she was crying terribly." Eleanor's vision went black. "What about the compound's car? They're all out on assignment." Mrs. Zimmerman noticed her pale face. "Why don't you wait a bit longer?" Wait. In her last life, she had waited a lifetime. Waited until Leo died in her arms. Eleanor wrapped Leo in an old raincoat and rushed out into the downpour. The rain blurred her vision as she stumbled along the muddy dirt road. Suddenly, a bicycle shot out from a corner. She couldn't dodge in time and fell heavily to the ground. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The cyclist, a young man with glasses, hastily got off his bike to help her up. Eleanor's first instinct was to shield Leo in her arms. "My child has a high fever. I need to get to the hospital." "I'll take you," the young man said without hesitation, taking off his raincoat to wrap around Leo. "The county hospital is just ahead." The hospital corridor was as cold as an ice cellar. A nurse took the unconscious Leo, frowning. "Where's the child's father? We need payment for the medical fees first." Eleanor was about to speak when she saw Ethan in the next room, bending over to tuck Mimi into her bed while Ivy wiped away tears nearby. "Ethan, you've spent so much on us again. It was already enough trouble before, and now with Mimi sick, you not only arranged for the best room but also paid for all the medical bills. How can I possibly accept this?" Eleanor's heart suddenly sank. She searched all her pockets and found only 50 cents. All the money had been taken by Ethan for Ivy and her daughter. She gritted her teeth and took off her wedding ring. "Ma'am, can this cover the medical fees?" The sound of the ring dropping into the tray was light, but it felt like a knife severing the last thread of their connection. Chapter 3. 3 days later, Leo's fever finally broke. When Eleanor returned home carrying her son, Ethan was pacing anxiously in the yard. "Eleanor, where have you been?" He strode forward. "You scared me to death. I came back and the house was empty." "Leo had a high fever. I took him to the hospital." Eleanor's voice was frighteningly calm. Ethan's face changed. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you?" Eleanor suddenly laughed. "Could I even find you?" Ethan reached out to touch Leo's forehead, but the child buried his face in his mother's neck. This instinctive movement made Ethan's hand freeze in midair. I didn't know Leo was sick too," he said, his voice dropping. Mimi's condition was critical. "It's always Mimi," Eleanor interrupted him. "Ethan, do you remember how old Leo is? Do you remember the last time he had a fever? Do you remember what he likes to eat?" Ethan opened his mouth, but couldn't say a single word. Watching Eleanor carry the child into the house, he quickly followed, trying to coax and placate her. When he couldn't get through to Eleanor, he tried to win over Leo. "Leo, Daddy will take you to the base to play, okay? Haven't you always wanted to see where Daddy works?" Although Leo was still angry with him, his eyes flickered at the suggestion. "Daddy, are you really taking me?" "Of course," Ethan scooped his son up and planted a loud kiss on his cheek. "Daddy took the day off just for you." Seeing the hopeful look in her son's eyes, Elena couldn't bring herself to refuse. She silently packed Leo's small water bottle when she heard hurried footsteps in the yard. Uncle, Mimi rushed in like a butterfly and hugged Ethan's leg. "Are you going to the base? I want to go too," Ivy followed in a fluster. "Mimi, don't be naughty, your uncle is taking your little brother." No, I want to go." Mimi threw herself on the ground and started to roll around, her new dress immediately getting covered in dust. "Uncle promised me last time." Ethan looked at Elena, troubled. Before he could speak, Elena gave a cold laugh. "Let's all go together." She knew this man too well. In her last life, whenever he had to choose between the two, he always chose Ivy and her daughter. The gate to the military base was imposing, with armed sentries standing guard. Ethan held Mimi in his left arm and Ivy's hand in his right. Elena followed behind with Leo, looking like two unrelated passersby. "Good day, Commander Hawthorne, your wife looks beautiful today," a passing soldier greeted enthusiastically, his eyes on Ivy. "And your little girl looks just like you," Ethan frowned. "What nonsense are you talking about? The one behind is my wife, and my son." The soldiers exchanged glances, and the air instantly froze. Elena felt Leo's small hand tremble in her palm. She squeezed it back, her nails nearly digging into her own flesh. In the office, just as Ethan was about to get some candy for the two children, a guard rushed in. "Commander, urgent meeting, the division commander wants you there personally. You all go to the mess hall for lunch first," Ethan instructed hurriedly. "The meeting might be long, don't wait for me." Elena had just gotten her food and left the mess hall when Ivy hurried after her. "Elena, I saw you at the hospital, you know. It's so pitiful, having a husband but living like a widow." Elena ignored her and walked away with her tray. Ivy, unwilling to be ignored, caught up. "We were high school classmates and married 2 brothers. Why should you live so well? Your husband is not only a commander but also young and promising, while my husband died so young. Let me tell you, if I'm not happy, you won't be either." Elena finally stopped and looked at her calmly. "If you like Ethan Hawthorne, you can have him." Ivy was stunned. "What do you mean?" Before she could continue, Leo's cries suddenly came from the office. Elena broke into a run, burst through the door, and saw Leo sitting on the floor surrounded by shredded paper. "Mommy," Leo pointed at Mimi with red eyes. "She tore up all the papers on the desk. I told her not to touch them, and she pushed me." Elena looked down and saw the words "classified document" among the scraps of paper. Her heart leaped. Just as she was about to clean it up, footsteps approached the door. Ethan stood there with a group of officers, his face ashen. "What happened?" Before Leo could speak, Mimi burst into tears. "Uncle, my little brother tore up your papers when I tried to stop him. He tried to hit me." The guard's face turned pale. "We're done for that," was the only copy of the battle plans for tomorrow's drill. Ethan's gaze shifted between the two children, finally settling on Leo. "Leo Hawthorne, didn't I tell you that no one was to touch anything in this office?" "It wasn't me, Daddy. Believe me." Large tears rolled down Leo's face. Ethan grabbed Leo by the collar. "Lying at such a young age, come with me." The sun beat down on the parade ground. Ethan forced Leo onto the concrete. "Kneel." Chapter 4. Ethan Hawthorne. Elena rushed forward to protect her son. "You have no proof. Why are you saying Leo did it?" "Was it Mimi then?" She's only 4 veins pulsed on Ethan's forehead. "Our son not only made a mistake, but he's also lying to cover it up. He must be taught a lesson. Leo is only 5, and he's already learned to lie at 5. If I don't discipline him today, what will he become?" Ethan kicked the back of Leo's knee, and the boy fell to his knees again with a thud. "Kneel until you admit you're wrong, men. Take your sister-in-law back to the office." "She's not to come out without my order." Leo. Elena was dragged away by 2 soldiers, her last glimpse being of Leo's small, swaying figure under the blazing sun. The office window faced the parade ground. Elena pounded on the door like a madwoman. Her nails broke, her palms swelled, but the guards outside stood as still as iron statues. "Ethan Hawthorne, let him go, let him go." As the sun set, the small black dot on the parade ground finally collapsed. Elena's voice was hoarse from crying. She could only manage raspy whispers. It wasn't until the next morning that Ethan opened the door. Elena shot out like an arrow and scooped up the unconscious Leo. The child's body was scorching hot, his lips were cracked, yet he was still murmuring, "Mommy." It really wasn't me? Mommy believes you. Elinor's tears fell onto her child's face. Just hold on a little longer. We can leave soon. Back at the compound, Elinor searched every cabinet but couldn't find a single grain of sugar. Leo had sunstroke and needed sugar. She had no choice but to swallow her pride and knock on Ivy's door. I need to borrow some sugar. Leo has sunstroke, she said, her voice raw. Ivy laughed, a sound like tinkling bells. She turned, took out a sugar canister, and smashed it on the ground right in front of Elinor. I'd feed it to a dog before I gave it to you, Elinor slapped her. Ivy screamed and staggered back, bumping right into Ethan as he walked in. What are you two doing? Ethan shoved Elinor aside. She stumbled and hit the corner of a table, blood instantly trickling from her forehead. Ethan, Ivy sobbed, covering her face. I saw the child had sunstroke and kindly offered some sugar, but your wife is still blaming me and Mimi. She smashed the sugar canister. I don't blame her, I just feel bad about the sugar. Ethan frowned at Elinor. Elinor, what's gotten into you lately? When a child does wrong, he should be punished. Isn't that how we've always taught him? How can you blame all of this on your sister-in-law and Mimi? They're innocent. Elinor wiped the blood from her forehead and slowly stood up. Yes, they're innocent. I'm the bad guy. My sins are unforgivable. Only then did Ethan notice her injury, and he panicked. Elinor, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to just now. I'll bandage it right away. As Ethan left, Mimi cried and tried to run after him, but Ivy held her back. Watching Ethan humbly trying to console Elinor in the distance, a venomous glint appeared in Ivy's eyes. She knelt and whispered in her daughter's ear, Mimi, do you want Uncle to be ours forever? Mimi nodded. Yes, Ivy smiled. Then Mommy will teach you what to do. For the next few days, Ethan, for once, didn't go to Ivy's. Instead, he spent every day trying to win back Elinor and Leo. Until one evening, he was gone for the entire day. That night, just as Elinor stepped out of the bath, she saw Ethan rushing out with Leo in his arms. What are you doing? She cried, blocking his way. Ethan's face was pale. Mimi has been diagnosed with leukemia, and only Leo is a bone marrow match. I'm taking him to the hospital now. Chapter 5. Elinor's fingers dug into her palms, the pain keeping her mind sharp. This never happened in her previous life. Therefore, Ivy had to be lying. I don't believe it. Go and have it checked again. Ethan's brow furrowed. How could someone fake something like this? Then why didn't it happen in the last life? Elinor nearly screamed the words, but bit her tongue just in time. She reached for her son. Give Leo back to me? Elinor, stop it. Mimi is in the hospital waiting to be saved. Ethan sidestepped her and strode outside, quickly getting into a car. Leo cried out in terror, his small hands desperately reaching for her. Mommy, Mommy. By the time Elinor reached the hospital, the light above the operating room was already on. Her mind buzzed, her eyes were bloodshot, and she frantically tried to rescue her child. I didn't agree to him donating bone marrow. I didn't agree, but Ivy fell to her knees before her, crying a river of tears. Elinor, I know I've wronged you, but Mimi is only 4 and only Leo can save her. Elinor wanted to slap her. As she broke free and lunged for the operating room, a sharp pain struck the back of her neck. She turned in disbelief to see Ethan standing behind her. Elinor? Ethan gripped her shoulders, his eyes filled with pain. I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you both in the future. When she woke up, it was dusk. Ethan was sitting by the bed. Seeing her eyes open, he immediately leaned in. The surgery was a success. Leo is fine, he's resting next door. Elinor shot up, her vision turning black for a moment. She pushed him away and stumbled towards the pediatric ward. Leo lay on the hospital bed, his face pale, his wrist still bruised from the blood draw. Seeing her enter, the child burst into heart-wrenching sobs, all his grievances pouring out. Mommy, it hurts. Elinor hugged him tightly, her nails digging into her palms. Ethan followed her in and said quietly, Mimi's side still needs someone to look after her. Get out, just get out. Elinor choked back sobs, not even looking up. Leo trembled and buried his face in his mother's embrace, refusing to look at him. Ethan stood frozen. In the end, he left. From then on, Ethan discovered that Elinor had changed. She stopped fighting for anything. Before, she would care if he bought more candy for Mimi than for Leo. She would get red-eyed and silent if he lent their thickest quilt to Ivy. She would even show a flicker of disappointment at his empty promises of next time. But now, she couldn't even be bothered to look at him. Just like now, I've pulled some strings for Leo's schooling, Ethan said, placing the application form on the table, testing the waters. But the spots are tight this year, so Mimi might have to go first. He waited for Alina to throw a bowl or a plate, or to question him with red-rimmed eyes, on what grounds? But Alina just nodded. Fine. She didn't even look up, continuing to mend a loose strap on Leo's school bag with neat, tight stitches. An inexplicable stuffiness filled Ethan's chest. What unsettled him even more was the matter of the TV station. Alina had saved the station director's drowning daughter by the river, and the grateful man had offered, "Comrade Lynn, the station happens to be looking for a broadcaster." "The job is yours," Ivy, standing nearby, was green with envy. That night, Ethan wrapped his arms around Alina's waist. Before he could speak, he heard her say, "Let Ivy have it." "You?" Ethan was so shocked he let go. "You knew what I was going to say?" Alina smiled, a smile as faint as morning mist. "It's fine, just let her have it. It wouldn't have worked out for me anyway." A sudden panic seized Ethan. Before, she would have fought with him for 3 days and 3 nights for Leo's chance to go to school. She would have gone on a hunger strike over a job opportunity. But now, she was like a pool of stagnant water. No matter how large a stone you threw in, not a single ripple would form. He knew the bone marrow incident had hurt her deeply, but their bond was strong. It wasn't something that couldn't be overcome. So he racked his brains for ways to appease her. But before he could come up with anything, Ivy burst in that evening, her hair disheveled, and fell to her knees before them. "Alina, I'm begging you, let Ethan have a child with me," she wailed, heartbroken. "My family is forcing me to marry a 50-year-old bachelor. They say a widow with a daughter has no one to rely on in old age unless I can produce a son." Chapter 6. Ethan was incredulous and immediately refused. "Sister-in-law, what kind of nonsense is this?" He instinctively glanced at Alina, only to see her tying Leo's shoelaces, not even lifting her head. She remembered this scene. In her past life, Ivy had cried, begging to have a child with Ethan. She had refused, thinking it was absurd. Ethan had also refused Ivy, but later, to compensate her, he had taken her and her daughter to live with him at his post, leaving her and their son behind in the countryside. Now she didn't even want Ethan himself. What was letting him father another child? So, Alina tied the shoelaces, patted Leo on the bottom to send him off to play, and then said calmly, "All right." The room fell into a dead silence. Ivy's crying stopped abruptly. Even Ethan stared at her with wide, shocked eyes. "Alina, do you have any idea what you're saying?" He shot up, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. Alina looked at him calmly. "I do. She is your brother's wife. You promised to take care of her for the rest of your life." She paused, a sarcastic curve gracing her lips. "Surely you can't bear to see her marry an old bachelor." Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Just as he was about to speak, Ivy began to kowtow, banging her head on the floor until blood stained the concrete. "Ethan, I'm begging you, I just want a child after the baby is born. I'll take Mimi and disappear far away, I swear. Just this once. I will never bother you again." "So be it," Alina said, sealing the deal. "You'll share a room tonight." Ethan felt as if he'd been struck by lightning, if he saw Alina with someone else. The mere thought made him burn with jealousy, but how could she? How could she push him toward another woman so easily? "Alina." He tried to grab her hand, but she deftly avoided his touch. "I'll go prepare the guest room." She turned and walked towards the bedroom, her back ramrod straight. Ethan stood rooted to the spot, a wave of unprecedented panic washing over him. "She loves me too much," he told himself. "She would never leave. This is just her way of protesting." Yes, that must be it. Night fell. The wooden bed in the guest room creaked under the strain, and Ivy's deliberately suppressed moans seeped through the thin wall. Alina sat by the window. Moonlight filtered through a gap in the curtains, illuminating the faded character for happiness on the headboard. Ethan had put it up with his own hands when they got married. She remembered their wedding night, the look of awe in Ethan's eyes when he lifted her red veil. She remembered him panting as he moved inside her, solemnly vowing, "I will be good to you for the rest of our lives, Alina. I, Ethan Hawthorne, am a man of my word." Those vows were now a dull knife, grinding back and forth across her heart. "Mommy," Leo had woken up at some point. His small hand gently brushed her cheek. "Don't cry. Only then did Alina realize she was crying. She held her son's small hand and forced a smile. Mommy's not sad. Mommy's happy, happy to finally be free. The noises from the other side of the wall grew louder. Ivy was now calling out Ethan's name, her voice intentionally raised. Alina pulled Leo into her arms and covered his ears. Go to sleep. Mommy will sing you a song. Her voice was very soft, yet it drowned out all the sounds from the room next door. The days passed just like that. As dawn broke, Alina placed the last piece of clothing into a suitcase. Leo sat up, rubbing his eyes. Seeing his mother packing, he asked in a small voice, Mommy, are we leaving? Yes. Alina stroked her son's head. We're going to a better place. Chapter 7, the child nodded, not fully understanding, then suddenly pointed out the window. Daddy's back. Ethan strode into the yard, his military jacket slung casually over his shoulder. For the past 2 weeks, he had spent every night in Ivy's room, but today he had returned unusually early. Alina, he wrapped his arms around her as she was hanging laundry, his hot lips pressing against her ear. Ivy is pregnant. My duty is done. Alina's body stiffened. The divorce papers hidden behind her back crumpled in her grip. Ethan, however, didn't notice anything amiss. He eagerly sought her lips. Let me touch you. Every second in bed with her was torture. Go take a shower first, Alina said, turning her head away, her voice calm. You smell of her. Ethan's eyes lit up, and he immediately unbuckled his belt. All right, I'll be right back. Hearing the sound of running water from the bathroom, Alina quickly grabbed the packed luggage and led Leo out the door. Before leaving, she took one last look at the house she had lived in for 7 years. The faded happiness character was still on the headboard, but the orchid on the windowsill had long since withered and died. When Alina knocked on Ivy's door, the other woman was trying on a new dress in front of a mirror. Well, look who it is, Ivy said, turning around, a mocking smile on her red lips. What, here to congratulate me on being pregnant with your husband's child? Alina smiled faintly. Yes, I'm here to congratulate you, and to discuss a deal. I'll sell you Ethan Hawthorne. Interested? Ivy clearly didn't understand. What do you mean? It's simple. Alina's voice was as calm as if she were discussing the price of vegetables. You give me $500, and this house, this man, they're all yours from now on. Ivy looked at her in disbelief. What on earth are you talking, Ob? She stopped mid-sentence, because Alina suddenly produced a set of divorce papers. I've already filed for a contested divorce behind his back. If you give me the money, I'll give you this man. I'll take Leo and go far away and will never appear before you again. Just tell me, is it a deal or not? Alina made a move to put the papers away. If you don't want him, I'll find someone else. Wait, Ivy quickly grabbed her wrist and pulled a wad of cash from a hidden pocket. This is all my savings, $490. Do you swear you'll never come back? Don't worry. In the future, even if you beg me, I won't come back. Alina took the money, then handed over her own blue blouse. Put this on and go to my house. He should still be in the shower. Ivy's eyes lit up as she immediately understood. The two women had similar figures. In the dim light, they looked almost identical from behind. Are you really letting him go? Ivy asked suddenly as she slipped on the faded blue blouse. Alina turned and left, holding Leo's hand. She didn't answer, but in her silence, she answered everything. The night was as black as ink. Alina, carrying her luggage and holding Leo's hand, walked towards the station. Goodbye forever, Daddy, Leo said, taking one last look at the compound. Alina shook her head and corrected him. No, it's goodbye forever, Uncle. When the bathroom door opened, Ethan was filled with joy. Every moment of intimacy with Ivy over the past 2 weeks had been agony. Only by thinking of Alina could he barely complete his duty. Now he could finally embrace the woman he loved. Alina, he hugged the person on the bed from behind, feeling the body in his arms tremble. Don't be afraid, I'll be gentle. The bedsheets smelled of his familiar soap, but the touch felt slightly different. Ethan didn't think much of it, assuming it was because it had been so long since he had touched his wife. He eagerly kissed the person's neck, whispering how much he had missed her all these days. How could you bear to push me away? Every second with my sister-in-law was torture. His hand slipped inside the clothes. Now I can finally wash her scent away. The person beneath him trembled even more violently. Ethan thought she was nervous and became even more gentle. At the final moment, he turned her over in that instant, his face turned deathly pale, as if struck by lightning. Sister-in-law, why is it you? Chapter 8. Ivy opened her mouth, but the first thing she tasted was the bitterness of her own tears. Seeing her cry, Ethan's face filled with panic. He quickly propped himself up to wipe away her tears. But when she remembered the words Ethan had just said while on top of her, a surge of anger rose from the bottom of her heart. Ivy shoved the man off her and said coldly, "Don't touch me." Caught off guard, Ethan lost his balance and tumbled onto the floor. He paid it no mind, assuming Ivy's mood swings were due to her pregnancy. So he quickly scrambled up from the floor and began to coax the aggrieved woman on the bed again. "All right, sister-in-law, don't cry, you're pregnant." At the mention of the child, Ivy stiffened. She bit her lip, a calculating glint in her eye. According to her original plan, she should now be pregnant with Ethan's child, one step closer to becoming his new wife. But it was clear that Ethan's heart still belonged to Alina. What could she do to completely win his heart away from Alina? Seeing Ivy calm down, Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. Using the excuse that a pregnant woman needed to rest early, he was about to send her back to her own home. But Ivy suddenly reached out, took his hand, and placed it on her stomach. "But the baby misses its daddy. Don't you want to meet it?" Her seductive gaze and suggestive tone ignited a fire that burned from his lower abdomen to his heart. He swallowed hard, trying to suppress the desire. But the woman before him was determined to have him. She propped herself up and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Ethan," she whispered his name as she brought her lips to his. Ethan's gaze grew hazy. Just as their lips were about to touch, a clap of thunder shattered the intimate atmosphere. Ethan's desire-filled eyes instantly cleared. He abruptly pushed the woman off his chest and turned to leave. Ethan, having come so close, how could Ivy let him go so easily? Thinking this, she scrambled barefoot after him. "Where are you going? Are you abandoning me and the child?" Looking at the hands wrapped tightly around his waist, Ethan's eyes darkened and his tone became distant. "We had an agreement. Once you were pregnant, we would have no further relationship. This child will be registered under my brother's name. As the child's uncle, I can only provide some assistance. Besides, the person I love has always been Alina. I have already done something to betray her. I cannot do it a second time." Ivy had not expected the man to be so heartless. A wave of grievance washed over her, and tears instantly soaked the back of his shirt. The woman's shoulders trembled. Not even for one night. From the first moment she saw him, she had fallen deeply in love with him. Now that she finally had a chance to be intimate with him, she was unwilling to let him go so easily, just for the sake of the child. "Stay and keep me company, please." Ethan's fists, hanging at his sides, clenched. He then raised his hands and pried her fingers off one by one, then turned to caress her face. His unexpected gesture brought a flash of joy to Ivy's face. Just as she was about to stand on her toes to kiss him, he gently pushed her away. "Ethan, I'm sorry." With those words, Ethan lifted the door curtain and walked out without looking back. Chapter 9. The rain was heavy tonight, and the thunder was loud. Alina and Leo were most afraid of this kind of weather. It was better when Ethan was with them, but now that he was gone, he didn't know how frightened the mother and son would be. At this thought, he quickened his pace. But just then, a voice called out from behind him. "Ethan." Ethan turned to see Ivy standing at the door on the verge of tears, and in her hand, she was holding a knife. His eyes trembled. "Sister-in-law, what are you doing?" "Put the knife down." He started forward to snatch the knife from her, but Ivy pressed the blade against her stomach and shook her head. "Don't come any closer. If you take one more step, I'll kill this child." As she spoke, a fierce look flashed in her eyes. Ivy was truly at her wit's end. No matter how nicely she spoke, his heart was only for Alina. Even though she had slept with him for so long, even though she carried his child, he wouldn't spare her a second glance. She couldn't bear to think about what would happen to her and the child after it was born. Perhaps he would reconcile with Alina and they would continue to live their own private life. Perhaps he would give half his heart to this child and provide some money. But no matter what he did, she, who had invested so much, would still not win his heart and his person. She never made losing deals, so she could only take a desperate risk and expose their sordid relationship to everyone. Only then could he and Alina divorce. Only then could she become the new commander's wife. Ethan couldn't let her harm herself like this. He spoke soothingly while trying to take the knife from her hand. Just as he was about to touch the knife in her hand, she seemed to grow eyes in the back of her head and pulled the hand with the knife back. What little patience Ethan had left was completely worn away. If it weren't for the fact that Ivy was pregnant and his brother's widow, he would have already laid hands on her. "Ivy Lowell, give me the knife?" "No, not unless you stay and sleep with me tonight." "Impossible. You are my brother's wife." "This is against all propriety," Ethan said righteously. "Be good, put the knife down." "Against propriety? You've slept with me so many times, we even have a child together, and now you remember I'm your sister-in-law." Ivy, holding the knife in one hand and poking his chest with the other, backed him into a corner until he had nowhere to retreat. Her exceptionally bright eyes reflected his stern facade. "Ethan Hawthorne, don't tell me that after taking care of me and Mimi all these years, you haven't had other thoughts." Ethan naturally had not. All these years, whether it was taking care of you or providing for you and your daughter, it was all according to my brother's last will. As for this child, it was only because I couldn't bear to see you marry an old man. Other than that, I have never had any other thoughts about you. Ethan thought his actions had caused a misunderstanding and immediately explained. But what he didn't expect was that Ivy's next words were even more explosive. "You haven't had other thoughts about me, but do you know my thoughts about you? I was the one who should have married you in the first place. But because my parents were in a hurry to marry me off, and because your brother had to get married first, we missed our chance. Now that your brother is gone, isn't this a sign from heaven for us to be together again?" Ethan had never imagined that Ivy had feelings for him, but he had no such feelings for her at all. To prevent Alina from misunderstanding, he quickly tried to push her away. "There's no possibility between you and me. The only person I love is Alina." Chapter 10, Ivy threw the knife to the ground with a clatter and shot him a cold smile. "Is that so? That's not for you to decide." For some reason, seeing her smile, Ethan felt a sense of foreboding. The next moment, she pulled him, switching their positions. A warm sensation pressed against his lips, and then the closed main door was suddenly thrown open, followed by a sharp scream. "What are you two doing?" The voice instantly pulled the stunned Ethan back to his senses. He shoved Ivy away and saw the neighbors crowding the doorway, with Aunt Harriet pointing at them, furious. "Scandalous, absolutely scandalous, you've both lost your minds." Ethan's eyes filled with panic as he tried to explain. "You've misunderstood, she and I." Just then, Mimi squeezed through the crowd and rushed over to hug Ivy, her voice filled with urgency. "Mommy, are you okay?" Ivy feigned surprise. "Mimi, what are you doing here?" Aunt Harriet walked over, holding Mimi's hand. "Mimi came to get us. She said you went into Ethan's house and didn't come out. She was worried something had happened to you and begged us to come find you. Thank goodness we came in time." "Ivy, are you all right?" Hearing this, Ivy's eyes immediately reddened. She lowered her head, her long hair obscuring her face, but her slightly trembling shoulders were enough to evoke sympathy. Seeing Ivy's state, Aunt Harriet grew even angrier with Ethan. She patted Ivy's shoulder comfortingly. "It's all right, just tell us everything. We're all here for you." Across from them, Ethan saw the act put on by the mother and daughter, and a dark premonition filled him. He tried to defend himself, but was pushed to the doorway by the crowd. Finally, Ivy lifted her head, glanced at him fearfully, and then slowly began to speak. "I originally didn't want to say anything. After all, one shouldn't air their dirty laundry in public, but I really can't take it anymore." Ivy did indeed recount all the care Ethan had shown her over the years, but she changed the story about the child between them. What was originally her, on her knees, begging and even using her late husband's will to force Ethan into bed to conceive a child, now became him having improper thoughts about her and forcing himself upon her. At the end of her story, she covered her face and sobbed. "I didn't want this, I really didn't. I know a widow getting pregnant is a sin that deserves retribution, so I secretly came to him, begging him to give me some money to get rid of this child, but it turns out." She didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what happened next. Immediately, the crowd, feeling sorry for Ivy, turned to condemn the culprit. Only Ethan's cold, deep eyes were now like frozen ice, sharp and piercing, mixed with a barely perceptible disappointment and rage. Even a fool would know he had been set up by Ivy. He had thought that at worst, Ivy just wanted more money. He never imagined she also wanted the position of the commander's wife. He suppressed the rage boiling in his chest. "Ivy Lowell, you've got some nerve." Hearing this, Ivy shrank back in fear. She knew all too well what Ethan was like when he had been crossed, but she truly had no other choice. Her retreat made Aunt Harriet feel even more sorry for her. Aunt Harriet slammed her hand on the table and demanded a solution from Ethan at the door. Ethan was currently fuming from Ivy's scheme, wanting nothing more than to get rid of her. Seeing Ethan remain silent, Ivy tugged on Aunt Harriet's hand, feigning a willingness to suffer in silence. "Actually, I don't need him to take responsibility. Just give me the money to get rid of the child." Chapter 11. Aunt Harriet, alarmed, immediately cut Ivy off. "How can you do that? You're carrying his child. He has to marry you." As soon as she finished, Ethan shot back, "No, I'm already married and have a child. The person I love is a leaner. I will never divorce her to marry someone else." Aunt Harriet was old-fashioned. "You slept with her and got her pregnant. If you don't marry her, are you expecting her to die? Besides, you can just divorce a leaner. She's such a good woman, she won't have trouble remarrying." As Aunt Harriet spoke, she turned to look at Ivy, but her eyes caught sight of a bright red booklet on the table. As someone who had mediated for many couples, Aunt Harriet knew exactly what that red booklet meant. Her eyes lit up. She picked up the divorce certificate, surprised. "Well now, Ethan, look what we have here." Aunt Harriet opened the certificate. When she saw the official stamp confirming the divorce, she could hardly contain her smile. "Isn't this a divorce certificate?" Buzz, it was like a bolt from the blue, leaving Ethan's mind reeling. The word divorce was like an invisible hand squeezing his heart, the pain making it hard to breathe. "What? Divorce?" His voice trembled, barely able to hear himself speak. "Who's getting a divorce?" he repeated. Aunt Harriet, thinking he hadn't heard clearly, held the stamped divorce certificate up to his face. "You are you and a leaner. Can you believe the timing? Over here, Ivy is pregnant with your child, and over there, a leaner divorces you. I know you love a leaner, but she's the one who left you first. You might as well take this opportunity to go and get married to Ivy." Her words elicited different reactions from the crowd. Especially Ivy, whose eyes shone with a crazed joy upon seeing the red booklet talk about a timely rescue. She had been wondering how to make them divorce, and now a leaner had obligingly taken the initiative herself. Only Ethan, who rushed over to grab the certificate, still hadn't processed it. He felt as if the world was spinning. Divorce? Eleanor wanted to divorce him. She loved him so much, how could she bear to divorce him? Number impossible. Absolutely impossible. Ethan muttered, his voice barely a whisper. The moment his fingers touched the paper, it felt like being burned by a red-hot steel plate. He snatched his hand back, but the paper seemed to stick to his fingertips, trembling. The 3 large words, divorce certificate, burned black holes in his vision. He heard the sound of his own throat swallowing, a metallic, rusty taste rising from his dry throat. The color of the official seal was strange, not the festive vermilion of their marriage certificate, but more like blood pooling under the skin. His fingertips unconsciously traced the raised seal on the paper, the characteristically rough texture of the official form scraping painfully against his skin. He suddenly remembered their registration day 3 years ago, how Eleanor's ring finger had a faint pink indent from the ring. Now, his own knuckles were curling with the same arc, pinching a pale crescent into the edge of the document. Sometime, 4 bleeding nail marks had appeared in his palm. The corners of the divorce certificate were stained with dark red specks, looking just like the dewdrops on the roses in her wedding bouquet. He reached out to wipe them away, only to realize the red dots were dripping from his own cracked lips. Suddenly, a mouthful of blood sprayed from his mouth. His world spun, and then he plunged into endless darkness. Oh my, he's fainted. Ethan, Chapter 12. When Ethan woke up on the hospital bed, he saw the stern face of a man from the disciplinary committee looking down at him. "Ethan, what's all this about?" It was clear the committee member had already gotten a full picture of the situation on his way over. In his mind, Ethan had always been a level-headed man. How could he have stumbled on such a trivial matter? Ethan's mind was still reeling from the fact that Eleanor had divorced him, and he had no heart to deal with anything else. But now that a superior was asking him about it, he had to handle it properly, or there would be endless trouble later. Thinking this, his clenched fist slowly relaxed. His voice was calm, betraying no emotion. "Sir, rest assured, I will handle this matter properly and will not bring disgrace to the military." Soon after, ignoring the nurse's advice, Ethan drove back to the family compound. Along the way, his hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes as dark as the deep sea before a storm. Ethan had been wounded many times on the battlefield in the first half of his life, but he had never imagined that, after leaving the battlefield, he would be viciously stabbed in the back by a woman. And the one holding the knife was the sister-in-law his own brother had entrusted to his care on his deathbed. His brother's last words and his own sworn promises were still vivid in his memory. But now, thinking of Ivy's twisted truths, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. "Brother, I'm afraid I can no longer fulfill my promise to take good care of Ivy." The military green pickup truck screeched to a halt with a sharp drift in front of the compound. Before the vehicle had fully stopped, Ethan leaped out, tossed the keys to a nearby guard, and strode towards Ivy's house. Ever since Ivy had been forced into pregnancy by him, her house had been swarmed with visitors, and the corners were piled high with all sorts of nutritional supplements. But it was now noon, a time when everyone was taking their post-lunch nap, so Ivy's house was empty, which gave him the perfect opportunity to handle things. Ethan bypassed the supplements and was about to push open the wooden door to Ivy's room when Mimi's whining voice came from inside. Mommy, will Uncle Ethan really agree to be Mimi's daddy?" The next moment, Ivy laughed, her tone full of confidence. "Of course he will. Mommy is carrying Uncle Ethan's baby in her tummy. He has to marry me no matter what. Besides, if he's really unwilling, our Mimi will just pretend to be sick." Mimi's confused voice picked up where Ivy left off. "Like when I pretended to have leukemia?" Ivy was very pleased. Exactly, the mother-daughter conversation continued. But outside the door, Ethan's face had already turned completely black, his eyes flashing with a furious, cold light. He never thought Ivy would not only scheme against him, but also incite her own daughter to deceive him the next moment. He kicked out with his long leg, slamming it into the thin wooden door. "Ivy Lowell, you're looking for death." The sudden, loud roar was like a clap of thunder, making Ivy's heart jump violently. The enamel cup in her hand crashed to the floor. The splashing hot water hit Mimi's tender calf, causing her to burst into tears, but Ivy heard nothing. Suddenly, she felt the pressure in the room drop, and a chill crept up her limbs. She slowly turned her head. A familiar yet furiously grim face appeared before her. Cold sweat soaked her back. She knew she was finished. It was all over. Chapter 13. It wasn't until the man's large, veiny hand closed around her neck and threw her brutally to the floor that Ivy truly recognized the man before her. He was fierce, violent, and merciless. "I always thought you were pitiful, which is why I took special care of you. I never imagined you could be so viciously cruel, daring to scheme against me time and time again, and even against my wife and son. Everyone has a breaking point, and Ethan's was a leaner, and Leo, the thought of his wife and son being manipulated by this venomous mother and daughter, fueled the flames of his rage even higher. Ivy knelt on the floor, begging him, frantically kowtowing and explaining, but his eyes remained as cold as Arctic ice. He lifted his foot to kick her in the stomach, terrified. Ivy's face went white, and she scrambled to get up. "No, you can't. Ethan, the baby in my belly is yours. A baby? It's nothing but a bastard. My only child is Leo." Thud, he kicked her hard in the stomach. The intense pain made Ivy curl into a ball, and a warm stream flowed from between her legs. Her piercing screams brought neighbors running. When they burst in, they were stunned by the scene inside. In the small room, Mimi was pale with fright, huddled pitifully in a corner, not even daring to wipe the tears and snot from her face. In the little girl's line of sight, Ivy lay motionless on the floor. Her disheveled hair covered her face, making her expression unreadable, but her trembling shoulders told everyone of her fear. Blood pooled from under her, gradually covering the entire concrete floor, the thick, metallic smell filling everyone's nostrils. People screamed in horror, about to rush in to save this poor woman. But Ethan stood like a solid wall, blocking them at the door. "All of you, get out!" Aunt Harriet, frantic, slapped him across the back. "Are you insane? What do you think you're doing? Can't you see Ivy fell? Hurry up and help her to the hospital." The murderous intent in Ethan's eyes receded slightly, but his tone was still cold enough to make one shiver. "The hospital? She doesn't deserve it." Fearing gossip, his late brother had given Ethan his final instructions in private. To save face, Ethan had never told anyone the truth. Everyone just assumed he was a man of great character and responsibility for voluntarily taking on the care of his widowed sister-in-law and niece. But now, Ethan had decided to completely sever ties with Ivy and her daughter, so he no longer intended to hide the truth. He laid everything bare, the real reason he had cared for Ivy, all her deceptions over the years, and how she had even harmed his wife and son. And finally, the true origin of the child in her belly. She said her parents were going to marry her off to an old man because she didn't have a son. She didn't want to, so she wanted to have a child with me. I refused, so she brought up my brother, even threatening suicide. I had no choice, so I slept with her. But I never imagined she would be so greedy, daring to fabricate lies to climb the social ladder. His final words, laced with disappointment and rage, were like a heavy hammer, shattering the web of lies Ivy had so carefully woven. The room fell into a silent stillness. The expressions on people's faces varied, but they all understood that they had been used by Ivy. Their kindness and sense of justice had become tools for Ivy's ambition. At this thought, they quickly retracted their remaining pity and took back the nutritional supplements they had brought. Someone even spat on the concrete floor in front of Ivy in disgust. Only Aunt Harriet, refusing to give up, still tried to push her way in. "No matter how much you two fight, you shouldn't take it out on the child, let me tell you," Eleanor left with Leo. "The one in Ivy's belly is our Hawthorne family's only grandson. If anything happens to that child, how will you face your ancestors in the afterlife? Ethan, I'm begging you as your aunt. At least she's your brother's widow. No matter how angry you are, you shouldn't risk the baby's life." Chapter 14, Ethan glanced at his well-meaning aunt and suddenly let out a cold laugh. This aunt of his wasn't exactly what you would call truly good to him. She was all talk. If you actually asked her to do something, she'd run faster than anyone. He said faintly, "Aunt, this is my family's business. You have no right to interfere. If you insist on interfering, I might just have to make a call and ask the higher-ups how your grandson got into his school." Aunt Harriet understood his meaning, and her face changed instantly. "You wouldn't? Oh my, look at the time I need to go pick up my grandson from school." As if remembering something important, the aunt slapped her thigh, lifted the door curtain, and vanished from his sight. Only then did Ethan turn his gaze to the guard beside him. "Take the child out first." He was only sparing the child out of respect for his late brother's memory. Mimi was too terrified to speak, and allowed the guard to carry her out the door. Ethan lifted his foot and walked step by step towards the person collapsed on the floor. The sound of his boots hitting the concrete grew heavier with each step, causing the woman on the ground to tremble uncontrollably. But at this moment, she had no strength left to retreat. She watched with wide eyes as the tall man grabbed her by the hair, forcing her to look up at him. Ivy's face, once full of pride, was now a mask of tear-streaked terror. Her lips moved, but not a single word could she squeeze out. Ethan threw her back to the ground and took out a handkerchief to wipe the blood from his hand. He said nothing more, did nothing more. He simply turned and walked towards the door. Just as he was about to lift the curtain, he suddenly turned back to look at her. "Ivy Lowell, let's end this here. Everything I've given you and your daughter, I'm taking it all back. Whether you live or die from now on has nothing to do with me." This sentence was like a death sentence for Ivy. It forced her to struggle up from the floor, her head raised, and reach out to him with all her might, her voice a piercing cry. No, don't. She had worked so hard to escape the plight of widowhood and live a life of comfort. To go back to the way things were before was worse than death. She crawled towards him with great effort, clutching the leg of his trousers, weeping. "Ethan, you can't do this to me. I did it because I love you. I even carried your child. Even if you don't care about that, please, for my late husband's sake, don't be so heartless, please." Ivy's words reignited the man's dying anger. He kicked her over, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "My brother? You still have the nerve to bring up my brother to plead with me? Does my brother know that the wife he loved for over a decade is a greedy, malicious woman who couldn't bear her loneliness and seduced her own brother-in-law, even getting pregnant with a bastard child? My brother must have been blind to have ever fallen for you." Ivy shook her head, trying to defend herself, but her excuses were pale and powerless against his merciless attitude. In the end, Her hand, clutching his, fell limply to the ground as she muttered to herself. "Ethan, are you really that heartless? We were husband and wife in bed for all those days. Can't you show me a little mercy?" At this point, Ivy knew her fate was sealed, but she still hoped that the man before her would, for the sake of their brief time as a couple, show her some leniency so that her future wouldn't be so difficult. But Ethan still refused to let her go. "Ivy Lowell, if it weren't for my brother, you would be dead under my gun right now." The implication was clear. She was dreaming. Chapter 15, seeing the coldness in his eyes, Ivy finally understood. She had never truly won Ethan over from a leaner. She had never truly had him. It was all her own wishful thinking. Or rather, everything she had was gained through deceit. Now that the truth was out, the things she had cheated to get would naturally return to their original place. She had never, from the beginning, walked into Ethan's heart. She had never even stood on the same level as him. He had acted as he did because of her dead husband's will, because he pitied her. He would never give her his love and his heart. Suddenly, she started to laugh, her voice growing louder and louder. She thought to herself that she hadn't lost out completely. At least she had stolen a few years of happiness through lies. But still, she was so unwilling. Why? Why could she never win against a leaner? When a leaner was around, she couldn't win. Now that a leaner had voluntarily withdrawn, she had still lost. Like a final question before death, Ivy stopped laughing and looked up to ask him one last thing. "All these days, did you ever? Even for a moment. Like me a little?" She didn't finish the sentence. She knew the answer. Her question was pointless. Ethan let out a cold laugh. "The only person I love is a leaner." With that, he stopped tangling with Ivy, lifted the door curtain, and left without a second thought. A tragic, regret-filled cry echoed through the sky. The day Ivy and her daughter moved out of the compound and back to her hometown, it rained heavily. As the mother and daughter huddled under the eaves of a building to escape the rain, a green pickup truck sped past them, splashing muddy water all over their thin clothes. The driver didn't spare them a single glance. At the military disciplinary office, Ethan finally received his verdict. Because his affair with Ivy had caused such a scandal, and because he had personally ended the life of the fetus in her womb, he was stripped of all his positions and power as a warning to others. He was now, in a sense, a man with nothing. But he didn't care about that anymore. He had spent the first half of his life fighting for his country. For the rest of it, he just wanted to live a good life with his wife and son. The problem was, he had no idea where a leaner had taken their child. In the distant port city, a woman in practical clothes, her hair tied up, briskly tossed a bundle of fabric into a loft. Then, she slumped onto the stairs, using a towel draped over her shoulder to wipe the sweat from her brow. The next moment, a hand holding a cold soda appeared in front of her. "Here." Eleanor was taken aback, then took the drink and thanked the man sitting beside her. Liam Mason chuckled. "Nothing to thank me for, it was just a small thing." He then turned and pointed to the pile of fabric in the loft. "What are you planning to do with all this fabric you bought?" Eleanor paused, then looked down at the empty shop below the stairs. "I'm going to make custom dresses." Port City had no real winter. People wore dresses or short sleeves most of the year. She had learned some relevant skills years ago from a teacher, and now she could finally put them to use. With the harbor now open to foreign trade, new styles of dresses were arriving on cargo ships and becoming fashionable. The styles she knew might be outdated. Thinking of this, she turned to Liam, who was opening the soda. "Are you free tomorrow?" Liam paused in the middle of drinking. "I am. What's up?" "Come with me to the trade market at the harbor tomorrow. I want to see what new styles there are and get some stock to sell." Chapter 16, they quickly set a time to meet the next day. After Liam left the shop, Eleanor locked the door from the inside and went to the backyard. After checking on her sleeping son, Eleanor heated up some leftovers from the fridge and sat by the stove to eat. As she ate, she thought about her plans for the next day. Since divorcing and bringing Leo to Port City, thousands of miles from their old home, Eleanor had only one thought: to survive and build a good life for Leo. Although she had nearly $10,000 in savings, it would eventually run out if she only spent and didn't earn. A few years ago, the government had issued a directive allowing Port City to open up, letting people start their own businesses. So she had jumped on the tail end of this opportunity, renting this shop and backyard on a street not far from the harbor, preparing to start her business. And Liam Mason was the original owner of the property. He had been a great help to her and Leo, who were new and knew no one in Port City. Thinking of his kindness over the past few days, Elinor decided to treat him to a nice dinner after their work tomorrow as a thank you. Elinor woke up extra early, and after a quick breakfast, she rushed to drop Leo off at kindergarten. By the time she reached the place she had arranged to meet Liam, he was already there waiting for her. She apologized as she got into the car, but he just waved it off, told her to get comfortable, and started the engine. The black car weaved through streets and alleys and soon stopped in front of the trade market. The market was a sea of people, with the sounds of hawking and bargaining intertwining, filling Elinor's ears with a din so loud she could barely hear Liam speak and had to raise her voice. They soon squeezed their way up to the second floor, where the women's clothing stores were also packed with people. The dazzling array of clothing styles was almost overwhelming for Elinor. It wasn't until the afternoon that they left, laden with bags of goods. To show her gratitude, Elinor insisted on treating Liam to dinner after picking up her son. At the restaurant, after ordering, they chatted while waiting for their food. At the next table, a bored customer pointed to a section of a newspaper he had just bought and laughed to the person next to him. "Can you believe it? In this day and age, someone is still putting ads in the paper to find his wife and son. Says he'll offer a huge reward. But I have to say, the guy is loaded. This ad has traveled all the way from Bridgewater to here." At their table, Liam took the dishes from the waitress's tray, placed them on the table, and was about to invite the mother and son to eat. Leo obediently nodded and picked up his chopsticks, but Elinor sat frozen, staring blankly, her eyes lost. Elinor, what's wrong?" After several calls, Elinor was finally pulled back from her chaotic thoughts. She forced a smile and shook her head. "It's nothing, let's eat." Though she said that, Liam noticed her unusual behavior. He didn't press her, just enthusiastically served food to her and Leo. "Here, eat up." As Elinor ate the food in her bowl, her mind replayed the conversation she had just overheard. An ad in the paper to find a wife and son, and the paper was from Bridgewater. The only person Elinor could think of who would do such a thing was him, but he already had a new child with another woman. They would probably welcome a new life soon. He had given all his attention to that mother and daughter, so how could he spare the energy to look for them? Even if he truly loved them, that was in the past. And she no longer wanted to pay any attention to news about him. She just wanted to live a good life with her son. That was all. Chapter 17, Elinor barely tasted her food that evening. She hardly ate a few bites. So, as Liam was driving her home, he suddenly called out to her, asking her to wait. Then Elinor watched as he hurried across the street to a meat pie stall and held up 2 fingers to the owner. "Boss, 2 meat pies." "All right." One moment, realizing his intention, a strange feeling stirred in Elinor's heart. Just as she was about to follow him, a familiar yet long unheard voice, a voice that should have been impossible for Elinor to hear, suddenly sounded beside her. "Elinor," buzz instantly, Elinor felt as if she'd been struck by lightning. Her back went cold, sounds faded into a dull hum, and she felt all the blood rush to her head, making her feel like she was on fire. She began to tremble uncontrollably, so much so that the sleeping child in her arms stirred with a soft whimper. But she couldn't pay attention to that. She just stiffly turned her head to look at the person who had called her. Finally, Ethan's face came into her view again. His eyes were bloodshot, his chin covered in stubble, his clothes disheveled, but none of it could hide the ecstatic joy of finding what he had lost, nor the urgency in his steps as he rushed toward her. Finally, for 3 whole months, he had finally found his wife and son just as Ethan was about to pull his wife and son into his arms. A figure shot out from the side and shoved him away. "Who are you?" Seeing a strange man standing protectively in front of Elinor and her son, looking at him with vigilance, Ethan froze. After a long moment, he finally explained, I'm her husband." "And who are you?" As far as Ethan knew, Elinor had always been uncomfortable with strange men. This man, who could step in front of her without her pushing him away, must be someone significant. But Ethan still firmly believed that Elinor only loved him. Hearing his explanation, Liam chuckled. "Husband, if I remember correctly, Elinor is divorced." And from behind Liam, Elinor's voice rang out. "Sir, please don't spread rumors about me, or I will report you." Hearing her detached words and seeing her distant gaze, Ethan's body trembled violently. He tensed up as if something had struck his heart, and his breath caught in his throat. He had imagined their reunion many times. Whether she hit him or yelled at him, he would accept it. But Ethan had never imagined that she would not recognize him. "Eleanor, what are you saying?" "I'm your husband." He was the man she had fallen in love with at first sight, the man she could always rely on, one of the most important people in her life. How could she not recognize him? Husband. Eleanor lifted her head, a faint, humorless smile on her lips. "I don't have a husband." Her husband was long dead. He had died the moment he agreed to his brother's last wish. The moment his heart began to favor another woman, and her daughter he had died in her past life, when he abandoned her, and their son, the heated argument woke the sleeping child in Eleanor's arms. Leo raised a small hand to rub his eyes and saw Ethan looking at him with an excited expression. "Leo, it's me, Daddy. Do you remember me?" As Ethan spoke, he reached out to hug his son, fantasizing that his son would leap into his arms as he used to, wrap his arms around his neck, and call him Daddy in his clear, bright voice. But Leo quickly dodged his hand and turned to Liam beside him. "Daddy, hold me." Chapter 18. That single word, Daddy, was like a bullet piercing Ethan's heart. The blood in his veins seemed to stop, turning icy cold. His lips trembled, but he couldn't make a sound. He stood like a soulless puppet, staring blankly as the strange man happily took his son, planted a loud kiss on his cheek, and joyfully replied, "Hey." After what felt like an eternity, Ethan finally found his voice. "What? What did you just call him? Daddy?" His son, his own flesh and blood, the son he had raised, was calling someone else Daddy? Leo, oblivious to Ethan's turmoil, simply said with an innocent air, "Daddy." "What's wrong, Uncle?" Instantly, a mouthful of blood welled up in Ethan's throat, the pain so intense he instinctively bent over, clutching his chest. But the family of 3 before him had no intention of lingering. They walked into the shop and shut the door, leaving a lone, desolate figure standing on the street. Inside the room, after letting his mom change him into his pajamas, Leo wriggled into the warm bed like a little eel. Just as Eleanor was about to get up and leave, Leo's muffled voice came from under the covers. "Mommy, what is it?" Eleanor sat back down on the edge of the bed and stroked her son's head. I didn't mean to call Uncle Liam Daddy today on purpose. It was just that a long time ago, when another little girl had called Ethan Daddy, he had answered. A pang of heartache flashed in Eleanor's gentle eyes. She leaned down and kissed her son's cheek. "It's okay. Maybe one day he really will be your daddy." Eleanor wasn't so wounded by her last relationship that she had sworn off finding love again. The child was still young and needed a father figure in his life. However, she hadn't yet established herself in Port City, so finding a new father for her son would have to wait. As for what this new father would be like, she didn't have high standards. He just had to be good to her son. After coaxing her son to sleep, Eleanor quietly got up and left the room, her eyes immediately falling on Liam, who was still sitting on the sofa. Her hand, holding the doorknob, tightened for a moment before she looked at him again. "Thank you for today. Thank you for being willing to help her and her son out of a difficult situation." Then, Eleanor continued to explain, "About Leo calling you Daddy, I can explain. I hope you won't take it to heart. It doesn't matter to me." "What?" Eleanor didn't react for a moment. She watched as Liam rose from the sofa and walked towards her. His tall frame completely enveloped her, blocking the dim light and obscuring his expression. But she could still feel the scorching heat radiating from him, forcing her to step back. But behind her was only a solid wall, leaving her no escape. Seeing her small movement, Liam let out a soft chuckle, which made her ears turn an even deeper shade of red. "What I mean is, Leo can call me whatever he wants." Liam took a few steps back, giving her space to breathe. Eleanor finally let out a sigh of relief, a bitter smile touching her lips. "If I could, I'd rather he didn't have that father at all." After all, she never expected that Ethan's thoughtless actions back then would have such a severe impact on Leo. Liam instantly understood the deep story hidden in her words. As an outsider, he shouldn't pry into her past, but he found himself wanting to know everything about her. "If it's okay, would you mind telling me about your past with him?" It's mainly because I can see you don't want to get entangled with him. If I know more, maybe I can help you get rid of him in the future. If it's not convenient..." It's okay. I'll tell you, Eleanor suddenly interrupted. She remembered how Ethan had misunderstood their relationship today, which was why he hadn't pursued them further. If it meant finding a permanent solution, she was willing to ask for Liam's help. It was love at first sight for us. In Bridgewater, most marriages were arranged by matchmakers. A couple like her and Ethan, who had fallen in love and decided to marry on their own, was rare. Chapter 19, precisely because of this, Eleanor and Ethan knew how precious their relationship was. So, after getting married, they had a blissful period and even had a son. Just as Eleanor thought she would live happily ever after with Ethan and their son, Ethan's older brother died. She stood in the corner, her voice faint as she recounted her failed marriage with Ethan, her tone so calm it was as if she were telling someone else's story. But this only made Liam's heart ache for her more. He couldn't help but take her hand, offering silent comfort. After the last word was spoken, the room fell into a profound silence. Neither spoke again, only the sound of their breathing filled the air. After a while, Liam spoke again. Eleanor, it's not your fault. From the beginning to the end of the story, Eleanor had been blaming herself. If she had been ruthless, if she had divorced Ethan the first time he sacrificed her and their son's interests to please Ivy and her daughter, or if, in her past life, she had taken her son and left when Ethan insisted on having a child with Ivy, perhaps all the subsequent heartache could have been avoided. She had begun to doubt herself more and more, but now someone was telling her she was not at fault. Liam raised his hand and pulled her into his embrace, telling her word by word, "You did nothing wrong. He is the one at fault. You don't have to blame yourself for him." Finally, under Liam's comfort, Eleanor managed to compose herself, only then realizing she had been held in his arms for some time. Although she quickly pushed him away, the straightforward care in his eyes still sent her heart into a flutter. As someone who had been through it before, she knew all too well what those emotions meant, but she couldn't possibly accept Liam's affection. He was in his prime, he could meet a better woman in the future. He shouldn't waste his time on her. Eleanor swallowed, steadying herself before looking at him again. "Are you staying tonight, or?" "I'll stay. Since he's misunderstood our relationship, we might as well go along with it." Liam also tucked away the emotion in his eyes and spoke seriously. Her expression was plain for him to see. He had been too hasty, but it didn't matter. They had plenty of time. The next day was Saturday. Leo was up at the crack of dawn, shouting for Eleanor and Liam to hurry up and take him to the amusement park. Eleanor, while answering Leo, slung the bag she had packed the night before over her shoulder. Leo hadn't been to the amusement park in almost 2 years. He had heard from his classmates that there were many new and exciting rides. He couldn't wait to go. Seeing his mother still walking slowly, he stomped his feet in impatience, then rushed back, taking Eleanor's hand in one and Liam's in the other, and pulled them towards the door. But as soon as Leo opened the door, he was startled by the figure standing there. Liam quickly caught the stumbling child and looked towards the door, where he saw Ethan, who had been standing there all night. Seeing the closed door open again, the man, whose eyes had been vacant, instantly lit up Eleanor, after witnessing his wife's denial and his son calling another man Daddy the night before. Ethan still hadn't accepted the reality. He stubbornly believed they were just trying to spite him. So, Ethan had stood guard here all night, wanting to get to the bottom of it. But Eleanor had no intention of getting entangled with him any further. Their relationship had been completely severed the day the divorce was finalized. So when she saw Ethan lunge towards her, Eleanor quickly hid behind Liam, urging him in a low voice to hurry. Liam shoved Ethan aside and, holding her hand, started walking towards the car in the distance. Eleanor, Chapter 20. From his arrival in Port City last night until this morning, Ethan hadn't had a single drop of water. As a result, he had no strength and was easily pushed to the ground. But he paid it no mind. He scrambled up and chased after them. "Eleanor, wait. I know you and our son are angry with me, but I can explain everything. You don't have to stage a play with some random man just to spite me. What if people start gossiping about you?" Every word he said was supposedly for their sake, but it only made the two people in front of him scowl. Liam stopped and turned to face him. "Sir, I'll ask you to watch your mouth. Eleanor and I are not as sordid as you think." Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sordid. If you truly cared for them, you wouldn't have gone into her house. It was a good thing Eleanor lived on a quiet street, Otherwise, he couldn't imagine the consequences. That's enough. Ethan, Alina finally couldn't take it anymore. What I do has nothing to do with you. Seeing that she was finally acknowledging him, Ethan's anger turned to elation. He knew it. How could Alina not love him? She had just found some man to make him jealous. Thinking this, he adopted the air of the man of the house and tried to drive Liam away. I don't care who you are, but please leave now. She and the child have me, their husband and father, and that's enough. Before Ethan could finish, Liam laughed out loud. Leave? You and Alina are divorced. You have no relationship whatsoever. What right do you have to tell me to leave? Ethan's eyes flickered, but he feigned composure. That was just something she did to anger me. I will naturally win them back. Before he could finish, the fed-up Alina cut him off. Enough, Ethan. My divorcing you was a well-thought-out decision, not a momentary impulse. Besides, now that we're divorced, my son and I have no connection to you. Instead of wasting your time harassing me, you should go back and take care of your pregnant sister-in-law. No, I'm not leaving. Ethan had finally found them. How could he possibly leave? And even if he were to leave, he would take them back to Bridgewater with him. Alina, let me explain. It was all a misunderstanding. Ivy lied to me. I only just found out the truth about her and her daughter. I've already dealt with her pregnancy and sent them back to the countryside. He grew more agitated as he spoke. Although it had been months since he'd seen Ivy and her daughter for who they were, a surge of anger still rose in him whenever he thought about it. Especially now, seeing her and his son again, he wanted to pour out his grievances, hoping to soften their hearts and gain some comfort. But Alina remained as distant and cold as ever, as if his problems had nothing to do with her. And in reality, they didn't. Ethan, I told you countless times to investigate the truth, but you never believed me once. She ignored him, turned, and led Liam, who was holding their son, to the car. Let's go. To the amusement park. 2 years later, Leo was at the amusement park again. Overjoyed, he went on many rides in a row. Even when the two adults were exhausted, Leo still wanted to ride the carousel. Watching Leo on the horse, clapping and cheering with excitement, Alina's heart ached. She found herself saying to Liam beside her, "You know, Leo used to have a very good life." Chapter 21, since she had told him her past the night before, she found herself constantly talking to him about small things from her past. Our family's financial situation was quite good. We could take Leo to the amusement park once a month, so that day of the month became the day Leo looked forward to the most. But later, after he started taking care of his brother's daughter, my Leo never went again. He could have taken Leo with him, but just because his niece said she didn't want to, he lied to Leo and said, "Next time." Until we divorced, he never took our son to the amusement park again. It wasn't just that. There were many other things that Ethan had only ever paid lip service to. Liam looked at her bitter smile, and his heart felt a pang of sympathy. He was about to reach out and cover her hand with his, but then, as if remembering something, he pulled his hand back and clenched it into a fist. "It's okay. From now on, we can bring him here every week." The two of them had a great time with the child at the amusement park and were about to take him to the cinema to see a new movie. But before the three of them could enter, they were startled by Ethan, who had appeared out of nowhere. "Ethan, what on earth do you want?" Seeing Leo, pale with fright, shrinking into Liam's arms, Alina's anger flared. "Don't you know that our son?" But the words died on her lips. What could Ethan possibly know? Ever since he had shifted his attention to Ivy and her daughter, he had forgotten everything about her and their child. Even if she were to remind Ethan now that their son couldn't handle shocks because of him, it was too late. Seeing his son's fearful expression and Alina's grim face, Ethan knew he had done something wrong. After being spoken to so harshly by Alina, he had calmed down and rethought his plan. He knew their problems stemmed from Ivy and her daughter. Now that this major issue was resolved, she still had no intention of coming back. So he thought for a while and decided to approach it through his son. After all, he knew that Leo was Alina's life. If he could win Leo over, she would surely come back. That's why Ethan had decided to surprise Leo by taking him to the movies. Clearly, his surprise had failed at least halfway, but it didn't matter. He believed Leo would go with him. After all, no one knew his son better than his own father. "Leo, want to go see a movie with Daddy?" Hearing Ethan's tentative tone, Leo's eyes widened. In his memory, Ethan hadn't taken him to the movies in a very long time. Besides, his mom and Uncle Liam had already promised to take him, so Leo shook his head. No, thank you, I have my mommy and daddy with me. With that, he took Eleanor's and Liam's hands and swung them in front of Ethan. Hearing Leo still call Liam daddy, Ethan's face darkened, but he patiently said, Leo, didn't daddy teach you not to call people names casually? I'm not calling him names, he is my daddy. You let other people call you daddy, so why can't I call someone else daddy? And I like him being my daddy. He won't scare me like you do. The child's blunt words were like a sharp knife twisting in Ethan's heart, the pain making every breath a torment. But Eleanor felt that wasn't enough. She had to rub salt in the wound. Ethan, don't blame Leo for calling someone else daddy. The day you came back from your mission, I made a bet with Leo. If you entered our house first, Leo would keep calling you daddy. If not, he wouldn't want you anymore. Suddenly, the scene from that day flashed in Ethan's mind. He had rushed into the compound, laden with bags, but he hadn't entered his own home. So, you were the one who didn't want Leo first. Don't blame him for not wanting you now. Chapter 22, with that, Eleanor stopped looking at Ethan's reaction and led Leo and Liam inside. But Ethan didn't give up just because of what Leo said. He followed them to the ticket counter. When he got there, Leo was being held up high by Liam, asking him which movie he wanted to see. Without a moment's hesitation, Ethan walked up, pointed to a new patriotic war film, and asked Leo, Leo, shall we watch this movie? Without waiting for Leo's answer, he was about to take out money to buy tickets. Leo had grown up in the military compound and often went to the base with him. Influenced by this, Leo had always enjoyed watching these kinds of films. But now, Leo rejected him without hesitation. No, I want to see this one. Ethan followed his son's hand and saw a poster for an animated movie on the wall. He frowned immediately. Leo, you're a little boy. So what if he's a little boy? Liam scoffed. If he likes it, let him watch it. Ignoring the man's suddenly darkened expression, he smiled at the attendant. Hello, we'd like 3 tickets, please. Eleanor was the last one to enter the cinema, tickets in hand. She didn't look at Ethan, but simply stated a fact in a calm tone. You know Leo is just a child. He's always liked these cartoons. He only watched the other ones before to accommodate you. The implication was clear. Leo didn't like him anymore, and what he watched was his own choice. Realizing this, Ethan slowly clenched his fists. Eleanor wasn't trying to remind him, but to state a fact. While he was busy with that mother and daughter, she and their son had slowly been cutting him out of their lives. They no longer needed him. Leo really enjoyed the movie, except for the fact that Ethan was constantly trying to please him. It was very strange. He didn't like Ethan anymore, so why did Ethan keep trying to win him over? He didn't like it at all. When Leo told his mother about his troubles, Eleanor was silent for a moment before looking down seriously at her son. Then let's show him with our actions that our Leo doesn't need him anymore, okay? Leo tilted his head, and after a long moment he said, What about Mommy? He had seen his mother secretly crying under the covers for that man countless times. Eleanor's smile widened. Mommy stopped needing him a long time ago. From the moment she and her child had died tragically in the snow in her past life, Ethan had been sentenced to death in her heart. Leo finally nodded. Okay, from then on, with a clear goal in mind, Ethan came to find Leo every day, rain or shine. He would bring Leo all sorts of breakfast and toys, or try to pick him up from school, or spend a lot of money on tickets to take him out to play. But every time, Leo would either ignore him or ask wistfully if he could bring Liam along. He only wanted Liam to be with him. Ethan grew more and more uneasy. He clearly realized that Leo needed him less and less, and was becoming more and more dependent on another man. This dangerous signal forced him to redouble his efforts. So, for the first time, he, who had never dared to step into Eleanor's shop, finally walked in. Seeing his hesitant and speechless appearance, Eleanor finally couldn't help but slap the table. Ethan, what on earth do you want? I just want to see Leo, to make it up to him. For the first time, a look of regret appeared on Ethan's face. Although he hadn't had any contact with Leo these past few days, he could still see from Leo's interactions with Liam that Leo had changed a lot. It was only then that he realized how much of Leo's life he had missed. Eleanor lowered her eyes to hide the sarcasm in them. Make it up to him? The greatest compensation he could offer was to never appear in front of Leo again. How will you make it up to him? Will you drag Mimi, who tore up the important documents, to kneel in the pouring rain for a day? Or will you find the bone marrow that was taken from Leo and put it back? Ethan stammered for a long time but couldn't say a word. Just then, Leo, wearing a matching outfit with Liam, rushed out from the back door with him. Mommy, Dad and I are ready. Let's go now. Hearing her son's words, Elena couldn't be bothered with anything else. She quickly came out from behind the counter and grabbed the bag on the wall. Okay, let's go now. Wait, where are you guys going? Seeing the three of them about to leave, Ethan quickly reached out to stop them. My dad and I are going to the daycare for the parent-child fair. Are you coming too, Uncle? Leo turned his head and looked at him with confusion. Chapter 23, of course, Ethan was going. This was a golden opportunity to mend the rift with his son. Leo didn't mind. He just said, suit yourself. And then, holding the hands of the two adults, he skipped happily to the car. By the time Ethan arrived at the event, he saw the three of them, dressed in matching outfits, heading towards the activity area. Anxious, Ethan tried to follow them in, but the teacher at the entrance, in charge of registration, suddenly stopped him. Hey, wait a minute. Which child's father are you? Ethan stopped in his tracks and said, I'm Leo's father, Ethan Hawthorne. Leo. The teacher adjusted her glasses and carefully checked the names on the list. But it says here that Leo's father is Liam Mason. At this, the teacher looked up sharply, her eyes full of suspicion. Who are you, really? Seeing that the teacher was about to call someone to have him removed, Ethan quickly explained. I am indeed the child's father. It's just that his mother and I are divorced. I came all the way from Bridgewater just to see my son. The teacher's suspicion faded, but she still wouldn't let him in. The rules here state that each child can only be accompanied by one set of parents. You'll have to wait outside. With that, Ethan had no choice but to wait outside. He stood on his toes, gazing wistfully at the laughing trio inside, his heart filled with envy. A long time ago, he used to be with them like that, but now he could only watch them secretly from the outside. Soon, the event reached its final stage. Each child had to climb a 3-meter-high tree with a rope to retrieve a gift for their father. Seeing his son take the lead, a warmth spread through Ethan's heart. It seemed his Leo still loved him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be trying so hard. So when Leo, amidst cheers from the crowd, snatched the gift and slid down the tree, Ethan couldn't hold back any longer and jumped over the fence into the park. He pushed through the crowd to the front and held out his hands to his son with a proud smile. Leo, Daddy's here, but Leo didn't even glance at him. He turned and ran towards Liam on the other side. Daddy, before Ethan could process this, a cry of alarm erupted from the crowd. The tree is falling, run. The scene instantly descended into chaos, a cacophony of crying and screaming. Leo was clearly terrified by the scene, his face deathly pale, frozen to the spot. And at that moment, the large tree above him began to topple. Leo, 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 as several urgent shouts rang out, two figures shot out from different corners, racing towards Leo. Ultimately, Liam was a step faster. He shielded Leo in his arms and quickly rolled to the side. But Ethan, a step too late, was tripped by an air mattress at the base of the tree and fell flat on the ground. The next moment, a heavy weight slammed onto his back, and intense pain shot through his entire body. Before he could even react, he was plunged into darkness. Ethan was woken up by the sound of crying. Don't sleep, please don't sleep. Daddy, please wake up, please. The familiar voices sounded so much like his wife and son. He struggled to open his eyes and saw his wife and son draped over another man's moving hospital bed. Chapter 24, the worry on their two faces was a blindingly painful sight. Just then, a doctor strode towards the mother and son and asked, Who is Liam Mason's family? I need a signature for the surgery. This time, Elena didn't hesitate. I'm his family. I'll sign, after all. Liam had been severely injured saving her son. Meanwhile, a nurse looking for Ethan's family to sign his consent form also asked if he had any relatives. The scene he had just witnessed had undoubtedly pierced his heart. Ethan closed his eyes in despair, hiding the bitterness within. I have no family. Can I sign for myself? Soon, Ethan and Liam were wheeled into surgery one after another. Just then, an anesthesiologist exclaimed, What do we do? There's only enough anesthetic for one person. The attending surgeon looked troubled. After a long moment, he walked back out to consult Elena. Hearing there wasn't enough anesthetic, Elena panicked completely. She pleaded with the doctor before her. "Please, doctor, I'm begging you. Give the anesthetic to the child's father. His injuries are so severe. How can he endure it without anesthetic?" "Yes, doctor, sir. Please give the anesthetic to Leo's daddy first. If it wasn't for him saving Leo, he wouldn't have been hurt." Listening to the mother and son's cries, a self-mocking look flashed in Ethan's eyes. He could understand Leo caring about Liam, but why Alina too? Just then, Alina burst into the operating room and ran straight towards him. Instantly, Ethan's dim eyes lit up. "Alina." Before he could finish his excited words, he heard her say, "Ethan, I'm begging you. Please let him have the anesthetic, will you?" Instantly, Ethan felt as if he had been plunged into an ice cellar. He thought she had come in to care for him, but he never expected her to. And she was begging him. In all their years together, she had never once begged him for anything. But now, for a man she had only known for a short time, she was begging him. He suddenly found it hard to breathe, as if a hand were squeezing his heart tightly. A piercing pain spread through his body, and his hands began to tremble. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. "Do you love him that much?" Forgetting everything else, Alina nodded quickly. "Yes." A bitter smile escaped his lips. As if clinging to a last hope, he asked, "And what about me? What do you think?" "Ethan, the reason I left you, the reason I don't love you, is not just because you favored another woman and her child. It's because no one can live with someone like you, someone who would sacrifice their own family for the survival of another's. A man who honors a promise to the dead like that is certainly admirable, but he is not suited for a life together." Seeing Ethan close his eyes with a bitter smile, Alina's heart sank. She could have easily said nice things to get him to give the anesthetic to Liam, but she just couldn't do it. She couldn't deceive herself and pretend to be in love with him again. So she withdrew her hand and got up to leave, ready to find another solution. The next moment, she heard him speak from behind her. "I was a soldier. I can endure pain. You can give the anesthetic to him." The day Liam woke up, he held her hand and asked only one question. "Alina, I don't want to wait any longer. Will you and Leo let me join you and become a new family?" She looked at him earnestly for a long time, then placed her hand in his. Leo copied her. "I will." This time, she finally didn't pull her hand away from Liam's. The warm scene in the hospital room was watched by Ethan from the outside, his heart filled with envy, yet he was helpless. He knew he could never win her and Leo back. The only thing he could do was wish them well. Ethan had arrived suddenly, but he left without a sound. He only left behind a letter and a thick stack of money for her and Leo. Alina said nothing. She kept the money and tore up the unopened letter. In the second month after Ethan left, a letter from Bridgewater was delivered to Alina by the postman. The letter said that Ethan was gravely ill and wanted to see her and his son one last time. Even just a photograph would do. But they had no relationship now. Whatever happened to him had nothing to do with her. So Alina simply put the letter back in its envelope, sealed it, and gave it back to the postman to return. As the postman's figure disappeared into the sunset down the street, two familiar voices called out from behind her. "Alina, Mommy, time to come home for dinner." Coming, she quickly turned and ran towards her love, her child, and her home.